What happens when a millionaire CEO dressed as a dishwasher watches a waitress hand her last dollar to a stranger? Franklin Vega stood outside the back entrance of the 15th diner he owned, tugging the sleeves of his oversized gray hoodie. His beard had grown since he started this undercover run 2 weeks ago, and his hair was longer than it had been in years. He looked nothing like the man who sat in boardrooms. He'd bought the chain 5 years ago from a retiring couple who'd built it from scratch. It had charm retro booths, real pie crusts, and lines out the door every Saturday morning. But lately, things had changed. Online reviews were slipping, complaints about food delays and rude service were trickling in, not enough to collapse anything, but enough to make him uneasy. "I'm here for the dishwasher trainee shift," he told the manager who opened the door, a tall guy with a buzz cut and a clipboard. "Name?" the man asked, not looking up. Frank V." The manager barely nodded. "You're late." He turned and walked in. Franklin didn't argue. He followed, keeping his head down. No one here had met him before. This location was in a different state than where he lived, and turnover had been high. The new manager, Bryce, had only been there 3 months. The kitchen was already alive, griddles hissing, plates clinking, servers weaving in and out. A server with a ponytail brushed past him. "Watch it, new guy," she muttered. Bryce handed him a stained apron. "You'll be on dishes and trash." "Don't slow anyone down." Franklin nodded, tying the apron around his waist. His hands were already sweating. By noon, he was elbow-deep in suds, steam fogging up the window in front of him. His back ached. The dish pit was narrow, loud, and chaotic. No one said much to him, he observed. There were 2 servers who stood out. One was loud, clearly didn't care. She rolled her eyes at customers, disappeared for long stretches. The other one, she moved fast, smiled at everyone, and somehow kept the mood light. "Table 9 wants extra syrup again," she said, laughing as she passed Bryce, who just grunted. "Can't you handle it, Shay?" he said flatly. She didn't miss a beat. "Already on it." Franklin watched her hustle, refilling drinks, calming a kid who spilled his juice, even covering for the other waitress when she vanished mid-shift. Shay Anderson. He checked the name on her server tag during a lull. Around 2, things slowed. Franklin stepped outside to empty the trash. As he passed the back parking lot, he heard voices. "Ma'am, I swear I haven't eaten since last night," a man said. Franklin turned the corner. A homeless man, rail thin and shaking, was sitting on the curb. Shay stood in front of him, holding her wallet open. "I get paid tomorrow," she said softly, "but here, take this." Franklin froze as she pulled out a crumpled dollar bill, her last one. "I'll be fine," she added, pressing it into the man's hand. "You need it more." "God bless you," the man whispered. Franklin stood there, stunned. She turned to go back in and saw him standing with the trash bag in hand. "You saw that?" she asked, brushing her hair behind her ear. Suddenly shy, he nodded. "That was your last dollar." "Yeah," she looked down. "It's not a big deal." "Yes, it is." Before she could respond, Bryce stormed out. "Shay, we got a bus of seniors just walked in," he barked. "You better not be out here slacking again." "I'm coming," she said quickly, brushing past both men. Franklin watched her go, jaw tight. He dumped the trash and headed back in, his mind racing. That night, after the shift ended, he sat in the break room, ankles sore, back stiff. Shay walked in carrying her coat. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. "Yeah, just thinking," she smiled. "Rough first day," he chuckled. "You could say that. What's your deal anyway? You don't talk much. You new to town or just passing through?" Something like that. She looked at him for a long second, then shrugged. "Well, if you're back tomorrow, bring gloves." "The water never gets warm," he nodded. Franklin walked back to his motel that night, heart heavy. He couldn't shake what he'd seen. A waitress offering her last dollar to a stranger while her manager barked at her like she was replaceable. Tomorrow, he needed answers. At 6:30 the next morning, Franklin pushed through the back door again, already in uniform. The air inside was thick with fryer oil and burnt toast. No greetings. Bryce stood near the prep counter, checking inventory with the cook, nodding without looking at Franklin. He slid into the dish pit and got to work. An hour in, he noticed something. The kitchen was understaffed. One line cook, an older man named Louis, was juggling breakfast orders alone. No prep cook, no busser. On the floor, only 2 servers were working, Shay and the other woman, Kendra. The dining room was filling fast. Plates stacked beside him like sandbags in a flood, a plate shattered behind him. Kendra had dropped a tray, no apology. She just turned around and stormed off, muttering something under her breath. Franklin glanced at Bryce, who didn't react. He kept scribbling on his clipboard. At 9:15, a woman in her 60s approached the dish area cautiously. Her hair was pinned back neatly, but her face held tight frustration. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm from table 11. "We've been waiting almost 40 minutes for eggs and toast." Franklin wiped his hands. "I'm just on dishes, ma'am, but I'll let someone know." She gave a tight nod and walked off. Franklin stepped into the kitchen. "Bryce," he said, keeping his voice neutral, "table 11's been waiting 40 minutes. Bryce didn't look up. "Then they can wait another 10, we're slammed." Franklin blinked. "They just asked politely. We're short. It happens." "You going to get back to dishes or what?" "Maybe if we had a busser and a second-line cook, we wouldn't be this behind." Bryce turned. "You don't run this place, you're a temp dishwasher. Do your job and stay out of mine." Franklin met his eyes, said nothing, and stepped back to the sink. By noon, the dining room was a mess. Tables hadn't been wiped in over an hour. Kendra vanished again. Shay was running drinks to one table while taking an order at the next. Louis was coughing behind the line, trying to keep up. The bell rang 3 times in a row. Franklin used a lull to wipe down a few tables near the dish station. Shay caught sight of him and gave a tired grin. "You're brave," she said. "That's Kendra's job," he glanced around. "Where has she been?" "Bathroom, again. Longest bladder in the state." He raised an eyebrow. "Don't say anything," Shay added quickly. "Last time I mentioned it, Bryce accused me of trying to start drama. Isn't it his job to manage shifts?" Shay shrugged. "I think he likes keeping things vague. Easier to blame us if something goes wrong." Before Franklin could respond, a crash echoed from the back. Louis had dropped a pan. He bent over slowly, groaning. Franklin rushed over. "You all right?" Louis nodded, sweat beading across his brow. "Didn't sleep. Took a double yesterday. My kid's school wanted tuition up front this month. You've been here since yesterday, ended at midnight, back at 6, happens." Franklin helped him up. "When's your next break?" Louis chuckled. "Break, you're funny new guy." Franklin's chest tightened. At the end of the shift, Franklin lingered near the lockers. Shay walked in, shoulders hunched, hair sticking to her neck. She opened her locker but didn't reach for anything. "You okay?" he asked. She eyed him cautiously. "Depends on the day. I'm guessing today was a bad one." "You mean besides running the floor alone, covering for someone who disappears every 30 minutes and getting yelled at because I forgot to refill one ketchup bottle?" He didn't answer. She exhaled. "Sorry, that was rude. I'm tired. You ever think about quitting?" "Sure, but I've got rent. My dad's in assisted living. I send money every month. This job's not perfect, but it's something." "Why not transfer? Another location maybe," she laughed, short and bitter. "We're the test store now. Bryce told us corporate wants to prove you can run leaner. Less staff, more profit. He even bragged about it." Franklin kept his face calm, but inside the weight of that statement hit hard. She turned to him. "Why are you here, Frank? You're not like the others." He hesitated. "I wanted to see how things worked from the ground up." She studied him, then gave a slow nod. "Well, now you know." The next day, Franklin arrived early and waited by the side entrance. From his spot, he saw Bryce pull up in a black SUV, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He stepped out, took one look at the line outside the diner, then walked inside without acknowledging anyone. That morning, Franklin kept a close eye on Kendra. She showed up late, signed in without clocking properly, and spent more time on her phone than with customers. At one point, she dumped a tray of dirty dishes on the counter near the kitchen and walked out to the patio, ignoring the bell ringing for pickup. Shay picked up the slack again. She hadn't stopped moving since the doors opened. Franklin could see her wincing every time she bent over to pick something up. At 11:30, a family of 5 walked in and waited near the hostess stand, unattended. Bryce was in the back, air conditioning full blast, scrolling on his phone. Franklin stepped out of the dish pit and approached the counter. "Hey folks, welcome. Might be a few minutes, but I'll make sure someone gets to you," the mother smiled faintly. "Thank you, we were about to leave." He walked into the back and found Bryce. "Front's been unattended for 10 minutes. Bryce didn't look up. "Not my job to host." "Whose job is it then?" Bryce finally looked up. "You have a problem, Frank." Franklin stepped closer. "I think the problem's already here." Bryce stood squared up. "You want to keep your job, or are you just here to stir up trouble like the rest of them?" Franklin locked eyes with him. "I'm not here to stir up anything. I'm here to see what's broken." Bryce snorted. "Everything's fine. Numbers are up." "You don't like it, you can leave." Franklin turned and walked away without another word. That evening, he made a call from his motel room, not to the regional manager. He bypassed them. He called his executive assistant and told her to schedule a flight in for the following morning. He wanted the head of HR and the operational lead on site within 24 hours. The next morning, he didn't clock in. He walked through the front door at 8:30, clean-shaven, button-down shirt. Shay did a double take when she saw him. Kendra was on her phone again. Bryce glanced up from behind the counter and froze. Franklin's voice was calm but carried weight. "Bryce, office." Now, the diner went silent. Shay stood still, eyes wide. Bryce opened his mouth, closed it again, then disappeared into the back. Franklin turned to Shay. "You've got this," she nodded slowly. He walked into the office and closed the door behind him. The reckoning had begun. Bryce sat stiffly in the cramped office chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. Across from him, Franklin stood, sleeves rolled, watching him without blinking. The air was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator compressor behind the wall. "You want to explain what you've been doing here?" Franklin's voice was low and measured. Bryce leaned back. "If this is about some customer wait times or staffing complaints, I already explained I'm not interested in excuses." Franklin's tone cut through. "I've been here, I've seen it. The staff's unsupported. The kitchen's overwhelmed. And you spend more time on your phone than managing anything." Bryce shifted. "I've kept labor costs down. That's what corporate wanted. We're running lean and still turning a profit." "You're not running anything," Franklin said sharply. "You're watching this place unravel and calling it strategy." Bryce's eyes narrowed. "So what, you're some kind of district auditor?" "No," Franklin said, stepping closer. "I'm the one who signs your paycheck, Franklin Vega." Bryce's mouth parted, but no words came. He stared, blinking slowly, processing. "You've got 5 minutes to collect your things," Franklin said. "You're done. You're serious." "I'm beyond serious." Bryce stood slowly, hesitant. "I've been following corporate models. You can't blame me for." Franklin didn't budge. "This isn't about models. It's about integrity, and you've shown none. You're finished." Bryce hesitated, then turned, yanked open the door, and walked out without a word. A few heads turned as he passed through the kitchen and out the back. Franklin stepped out moments later. The staff was still moving, unsure. Shay stood behind the counter, her hands stilling when she saw him. He raised a hand. "Everyone, quick minute." The kitchen quieted. Lewis turned from the grill, and even Kendra looked up from leaning by the drink station. "My name's Franklin Vega. I own this chain. I've been here undercover for the last few days, and I've seen both the best and worst of what this place has become." He looked around the room, meeting eyes. "Bryce is no longer with this company. Going forward, we're making changes, real ones." Kendra's face paled. Shay blinked rapidly, stunned. Lewis leaned slightly on the prep table, watching carefully. "I've already called our HR lead and regional operations chief. They're flying in today. We'll be conducting reviews, starting with staff hours, kitchen needs, and floor coverage. No more double shifts without relief, no more abuse of authority, and no more watching good people carry the weight alone." He turned toward Shay. "You come talk to me in the office." She hesitated, then followed. Inside, Franklin gestured to the chair across from the desk. Close the door. She did, slowly, then sat down, clasping her hands in her lap. You've been holding this place together, he said, and no one's acknowledged it. I didn't do it for credit. I know, he said, which is exactly why you deserve it. Shay gave a short breath. I'm just trying to keep the floor from falling apart. You shouldn't have to. I've gone through the payroll records. You've taken the most shifts in this location for the last 3 months. No call-outs, no complaints filed, not one disciplinary mark. She looked down, then back up. Because I didn't think anyone was watching. I was, eventually. He opened a folder on the desk. Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to floor supervisor. That comes with a pay increase, and we'll be assigning a new general manager within the week, someone experienced, someone who understands how to support their team. Shay's eyes widened. Wait me, I've never managed anyone. You already have, he said. Without the title. She sat back, stunned into silence. I'm not asking you to fix it all. I'm asking you to help build something better with the right support. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. He stood, and she followed suit. One more thing, he added. That man outside, the one you gave your last dollar to, I found him later, bought him lunch. He wanted me to tell you something. Shay blinked. What? He said. She reminded me I was still worth something. Her throat tightened. She swallowed. Thanks for telling me. Franklin opened the door. Let's get back out there. While they returned to the floor, a black sedan pulled into the lot. 2 people stepped out, Danielle from HR and Marcus from operations. Franklin met them at the side entrance, briefing them quickly. By early afternoon, interviews were underway. Franklin watched from a distance as Marcus walked Lewis through a revised schedule, promising a rotating prep cook to ease the load. Danielle sat with each server, one by one, behind closed doors. When it was Kendra's turn, she walked in with arms folded, chewing gum. 15 minutes later, she was gone. Not a word spoken as she slipped out the front door, keys in hand. Franklin didn't hesitate. He turned to Shay. We're hiring 2 more servers, immediately. You'll help with the interviews, Shay nodded. We need them. Lewis passed by with a fresh stack of onions. These your people? He asked, nodding toward Marcus and Danielle. Franklin grinned. They are now, about time. As the afternoon wore on, things began to shift. Shay organized the floor with clear sections. Lewis got a 10-minute break, the first one in days. Marcus met with the supplier rep to renegotiate delivery windows, ensuring the kitchen wouldn't be stuck without key ingredients again. Franklin took off his button-down and rolled up his sleeves, back in the dish pit for the afternoon. Not because he had to, but because it mattered. At closing, Shay approached him at the sink. You didn't have to do that. Sure I did. She leaned against the counter. You think this can really change? I know it can. She looked around at the cleaner kitchen, the quieter floor, the sense of calm that hadn't been here before. If you're sticking around, she said, bring gloves next time. Water still runs cold, he laughed. Noted. As the lights dimmed and the doors locked behind them, Franklin stood in the empty dining room, hands on his hips. The neon sign outside still hummed, casting a soft glow through the windows. He had seen the cracks, had felt the weight of them. But now he'd also seen who was willing to stand in them. He walked out into the night, for the first time in weeks, knowing exactly what needed to happen next. 2 weeks later, the rhythm of the diner had changed, not perfectly, not overnight, but enough that every person walking through the front door could feel it. The grime that once sat in the corners of the kitchen floor was gone. Tables were bussed quickly, the line moved steadily, and the air no longer carried the same tension it once did. It was a start. Franklin walked in through the front entrance just after dawn, the sky still low with morning fog. He wore no disguise now, pressed shirt, clean shave, and the calm demeanor of a man who had earned every wrinkle at the corners of his eyes. Shay was already on the floor, clipboard in hand, reviewing the new prep checklist with a young server named Rosie. The girl nodded as Shay pointed out station responsibilities. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice, and didn't miss a detail. Rosie looked nervous, but she was listening. You're in early, Shay said when Franklin stepped behind the host stand. "So are you." "I'm still figuring out how to delegate," she said without apology, "but Rosie's picking things up fast." He nodded, watching the girl reset a table with clean napkins and polished silverware. "You've got a solid eye for people." "I'm learning to trust it." Louis emerged from the kitchen, apron tied high, tossing a clean towel over his shoulder. He gave a brief nod toward Franklin as he passed, then turned his attention to checking the burners. A new prep cook, a soft-spoken man in his 20s named Malik, was slicing onions nearby. He didn't need instructions. Shay had already trained him on workflows and station turnover during the off hours earlier in the week. Franklin stepped into the kitchen, his shoes clicking against the now consistently mopped tile. "How's your back holding up?" he asked Louis, keeping his voice casual. Louis didn't stop working. "Better. Haven't had to pull a double since you brought in Malik." "I still go home sore, but at least I go home." "You tell your kid you got your evenings back yet?" Louis chuckled. "Told her last night. She didn't believe me till I showed up at her recital." Franklin smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Out front, the first wave of regulars began to trickle in. Shay greeted them with practiced ease, pairing each with a server before they could even glance around for a seat. Franklin watched as she guided Rosie through her first table, a family with a toddler and a distracted father. Rosie hesitated when the child knocked over a juice cup, but Shay stepped in with a fresh napkin and a quiet word. Rosie adjusted, reset the cup, and handled the rest of the order without needing more help. Franklin leaned against the far wall near the register, arms crossed, watching the floor operate. He wasn't looking for mistakes, he was watching for signs of growth, and he saw them everywhere. Marcus, the operations lead, walked in through the side entrance carrying a tablet. He gave a short wave and headed toward the back office. Franklin followed. Inside, Marcus pulled up a dashboard of performance metrics. Last week's sales were up 6% from the same time last month. Customer wait times are down by a full minute on average, and we've had 0 shift callouts in 10 days. Franklin nodded. "I'm not surprised." Shay's restructured the floor schedule herself. "She's got people cross-trained now, so no one's stuck doing the same task all day." Marcus tapped the screen. "I've also got feedback from corporate. They were skeptical about the cost of adding staff and giving breaks back, but the numbers don't lie. They never do." "That's the part people forget." "Bryce left a mess," Marcus added. "Payroll inconsistencies, missing vendor receipts. We've filed a report with legal. HR's following up on the retaliation complaints. 2 other employees from his previous location came forward." Franklin's face hardened. "Make sure they're heard, and compensated if it's warranted. No sweeping things under the rug." Marcus nodded. "Already in motion." They returned to the floor as the lunch crowd started to build. Shay was now directing Rosie and another new hire, Theo, through a mid-shift changeover. The servers moved with more confidence than before, their steps synced like a kitchen ballet, not flawless, but efficient. Kendra's replacement had been a quiet woman named Dina, who had 10 years of hospitality experience and 0 tolerance for idle hands. She didn't gossip. She didn't vanish mid-shift. She came in, did the work, and left with a nod. Shay had hired her after a single trial shift. Franklin stepped beside Shay during a brief lull. "How are they holding up?" "They're green," she said, watching Rosie refill a coffee pot, "but they're trying. And they're not afraid to ask questions, which means they know they're allowed to." Shay looked at him for a moment. "I didn't think I'd feel comfortable in this position, but it's starting to make sense now. Not easy, just possible." Franklin's phone buzzed. He stepped aside for a moment, read the message, and typed a quick reply before returning. "You're not leaving again, are you?" Shay asked, half joking. "I will be, eventually, but not today," she nodded. "Good, people work different when they know someone's watching. But they work better when they know someone cares." He gave a slow nod. "That's why I'm here." By late afternoon, the second shift began to step in. Malik wiped down his station and handed it off to the evening cook. Dina finished her rotation and clocked out with a quiet goodbye. Rosie stayed behind to observe the dinner prep like Shay had encouraged. Franklin stood near the door as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the booths. He watched a young couple being seated, a mother helping her son with his coat, two friends arguing over pie flavors. The place felt alive again, not just full, but functional. Grounded, he glanced toward the register where Shay was finalizing the day's cash count. When she looked up, he gestured for her to step outside for a minute. They stood near the parking lot, the air cooler now, a faint breeze cutting through the fading heat. "You're due for a raise," he said plainly. She blinked. "Already? You've stabilized this location in 2 weeks. You've trained 2 new hires and brought customer satisfaction up faster than any manager I've seen. You didn't ask for the spotlight, but you didn't shrink from it either. I just didn't want anyone walking out the way I used to feel, used up and invisible. And they won't." "Not under you," she crossed her arms, but not defensively, just thoughtful. "I still think about that guy, the one I gave the $1 to, so do I. I didn't know what else to do, I just couldn't walk away. That moment what you did, it forced me to stop pretending this place was fine. You handed over all you had, and I hadn't even been giving people my time." She didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "I guess we both needed that shift." Franklin nodded once. "I'll be back in a few weeks," quietly, "no uniforms this time, just watching." "I'll be here," she said. Probably telling someone to stop cutting corners on the toast. As they walked back inside, the diner buzzed with the familiar rhythm of evening. Booths filled. Orders moved. Music played at just the right volume. The lights, once too dim or flickering, glowed warm and steady. Franklin paused at the threshold, watching the team take over the night. He had gone looking for the problem. What he found instead was the answer, and it was wearing an apron, holding an empty wallet, and refusing to let anyone go hungry. He stepped back into the crowd, no longer undercover. "Just present."